Hello everybody and welcome to another Twilight Zone review. Today it is Season 2, Episode 12, Dust, written by Rod Serling and starring Thomas Gomez as Sykes, Vladimir Sokolov as Gallegos, and John Larch as Sheriff Koch. And I have to say that Dust is an episode you don't really hear too much about, but I think it's interesting enough that there's some things worth discussing in it. And I'll get to that right now. This episode actually starts with Rod Serling's opening narration, which is unusual, especially for an episode past Season 1. And what we find out is we're in a western town, and basically there's a man in a cell. I'll call him Young Gallegos, for the sake of no confusion. And he's about to be hanged, basically, for killing a child. He claims it was an accident, but apparently he went to a trial and they decided he was to be killed for this. And we are also introduced to our villain of the piece named Sykes, really a pretty despicable villain. And he's basically mocking young Gallegos on the street. He then visits the sheriff's office and mocks him more. He also is annoyed with the sheriff, who seems to have some compassion for young Gallegos and asks him where his sympathies lie. The sheriff says he has enough sympathy for the victim and, Gallegos basically, and he tells Sykes to leave. So we basically go to the next scene where we see a funeral procession, which is led by the victim's parents, and we also see, I'll call him older Gallegos, who is the father of young Gallegos, and he's pleading. He basically says he's sorry for what happened. His son didn't do it on purpose. If he could replace, the child, he would. He would give his life instead, but he can't. And of course, the parents are not interested, which I felt was good and realistic at this point in the episode. They're more worried, about saying goodbye to their child. And basically what happens is Gallego continues to plead for his son. He says this whole thing was an accident. And he also has a little girl with him, which I'm assuming is his daughter. And Sykes decides he's going to take advantage of this. So he basically tells the little girl, tell your father I have some magic dust. And this can turn all the hate that these people have into love. But it'll cost you 100 pesos. And, everybody will forgive what happened. And then the little girl leaves and Sykes just laughs. This guy is really, really bad. He doesn't care about anybody but himself and making money. So we go to the second half of the episode, which does start out a little bit slow. It seems to hurt the momentum a little bit. And the sheriff and young Gallegos just talk a little bit, basically about what happened. You can see that young Gallegos is sorry for what happened. And then we get a scene where a man is bringing his children to the hanging. The sheriff questions him on it, and the man says, they need to learn a lesson. And this is an interesting commentary on how people act, when events like this take place, and the different side. I like that they showed both sides of this, both the man's and the sheriff's. So Gallegos basically starts walking towards his noose, and a lot of people in the town are there. But then the father comes. He basically does buy the dust from Sykes, who convinces him it will really work. And the father comes up right before his son is to be hung and starts throwing the dust in the air, asking the people to believe in it. Basically, then he hears the rope go down and thinks it didn't work, but we find out that the rope broke. And his son actually was spared. Sykes can't understand how this happened because it was a new thick rope. So basically at this point the sheriff asks the girl's parents, do you want this to stop or should we do it again? And ultimately, after some contemplation, they decide to stop it. They say one victim is enough. And the father of the girl says there must have been some other kind of thing that intervened and this is what's meant to be. So the father goes away from this with his son, believing it was magic. And Sykes, the episode actually ends with Sykes, which was an interesting choice. And he doesn't get it at all. He has no idea what happened. He looks at the broken rope. Some children come by, and he actually does give the gold to the children. And he concludes it must have been magic. And he walks off laughing again, but not laughing in such an evil way. Now, overall, I do think this is a good, effective episode, and the ending actually did get to me. But there is a fundamental problem in this episode, which is that it does only show basically one side of this. even though it's very clear that this whole thing was an accident, I feel that they just show it so one-sided. We don't get enough from the parents' point of view, who would be, very upset about this, whether it was an accident or not. It kind of almost portrays young Gallegos as a complete victim in this whole thing. It's the way I took it. And even if he didn't do it on purpose, he was partially responsible for what happened. I think they mentioned he had been drinking or something. So it's a little bit too over the top on one side, but I get the point and the message about sympathy and compassion, and in my opinion, those are, good traits. I just wish it would have explored the other side of it more, because I think there's a case to be made. Maybe the episode would have had to have been an hour episode, which didn't happen, for another season and a half. But all in all, I do think the episode is effective, and it does make you think afterwards. And I felt the conclusion was effective, even if it's never explained. It's one of those you have to believe in magic episodes, which seem to work for me but don't work for everyone. So fair enough. But overall, I just can't help but think Dust is overall a solid episode, and that's why I give it a 3 out of 5. So 3 out of 5 for Dust. I recommend checking it out. See what you think. Thanks. Bye.